Is Gene Therapy Ethical? By Michael Prewster.
Manish Nagavalli.
Mihir Nagalia.
And Keyshawn Shaw. Gene therapy is a type of treatment used on patients where sections of DNA are brought into existing cells to help prevent or cure certain complications. Examples of gene therapy are germline gene therapy and somatic cell gene therapy. This technique was brought about in 1972, but has not seen a great deal of success so far. Cells harvested from patient. 2 is virus altered so cannot reproduce. 3, a gene is inserted into a virus. 4, altered virus mixed with patient. 5, cells become transgenic. 6, altered cells injected into patient's body. And 7, altered cells produce desired protein. Germline gene therapy targets the reproductive cells, which means that any modification seen in the DNA will be passed on to the generation. This method of gene therapy transfers DNA into cells that produce reproductive cells. Somatic gene therapy is when DNA is transferred into varied body tissues. This means that there is no genetic information being altered in further generations. What is CRISPR? CRISPR is a form of technology that is used to edit genes. This technology is what allows genes to be changed during the gene therapy.
We're now going to be exploring deeper into the technology of CRISPR. When viruses infect a cell, they inject their DNA. The CRISPR technology allows the DNA to be taken out of the virus and put in the chromosome in little bits. Essentially, this technology allows for cells to keep record of past viruses. The bits of DNA are passed to the cell's progeny so that many generations of cells are protected from that virus. When the bits of DNA are put into the bacterial chromosome, the cell makes an RNA copy. In this picture, the RNA is labeled as red, and the RNA is an exact copy of the DNA. RNA binds to a protein called Cas9, which is represented by white in this picture, and it searches through DNA in the cell to find a site for the bound RNAs to match the sequence. The Cas9 RNA complex cuts the DNA, making a double-stranded break in the helix. This complex can be programmed to notice certain DNA sequences and make specific cuts. Simply put, CRISPR is used to cut through proteins and make specific changes. And also, in the first part, it allows for the cells to be protected from specific viruses, acting as almost a vaccination card. We're now going to use this clip to help illustrate how the CRISPR technology works. So, as you can see, the DNA is copied and is represented by that RNA. And then the RNA gets attached to the Cas9 protein, forming that complex that we were just talking about. And then, as we were saying, the complex goes through the different genes to try to find the specific code that it's looking for in order to make the cut that it needs. As you can see, it's looking for the virus, and it slices it. Summary of the current status of our case. Our case addresses the issues behind the ethics of gene therapy. People believe that the tampering with the human gene pool is wrong and should not happen. The goal of our case is to find whether or not we should alter the genes of healthy embryos. As of now, gene therapy is continuing to be used, but typically only for specific diseases like cancer. This is a diagram that shows us the government funding of different types of treatments of gene therapy. What is the ethical issue? Germline gene therapy is a controversial treatment. It is known that future disorders can be prevented in future generations. It is possible that a fetus might be developed incorrectly and have long-term side effects. The ethical problem that comes about is whether or not you are willing to risk potential problems with future generations to get rid of certain variants of genes that are certain to be passed along. This quote backs up our claim that fetuses are affected and they are not long term they are not developed correctly. Quote, in the fetus, especially if given early in development, the therapy could alter germ cells that will eventually develop into eggs and sperm, causing changes that could be passed down to eventual offspring, a possibility that many scientists consider ethically problematic. This picture can illustrate the ethical problems that we see with gene therapy. Some questions that you have to ask yourself are: how can good and bad uses be distinguished? Will it only be available to the wealthy? Should we be allowed to use it to enhance basic human traits? And what is normal and what is disability or disorder, and who decides? Who are the stakeholders in this situation? Some stakeholders in this situation include payers, biotech, biopharmacists, government, patients, disease advocacy groups, scientists, academia. This picture illustrates the connection between the different stakeholders in this. For example, manufacturers are what create the technology that is needed to make this therapy possible, and the providers are the real world case studies that occur to help promote that this is a good therapy that can be used throughout, and it will be able to treat out like different types of diseases. And then the academia is used to actually provide the research that's needed for the manufacturers to create this, and the payers are what fund these types of things, and then the patient advocacy groups are what talk about the ethical issues that are seen and making sure that patients have a good quality of life.
What values are at stake in this decision, affecting the development of a fetus in unexpected ways, changing human genes to benefit one person, altering a God-given body, informed consent, and a risk of harm? A study performed in France in 2001 showed that a majority of people agree that gene therapy is unethical. 75% of the people agreed that science developed too fast, comparing the morality of human beings. In addition, 83% of the people agreed that limits should be put to science, since it would go too far on modifying nature. Which options are the most compelling and why? For germline gene therapy, due to the potential damage that can be caused for your future generations, it is believed that this is a poor option to choose, although some people may be willing to take the risk in order to get rid of a genetic issue. Most people think that this is not a risk worth taking. The somatic gene therapy is affecting your own body and not being passed down through generations. This form of therapy is effective at targeting specific issues with a good success rate. This option offers no large issue, unlike germline gene therapy, and it gives the benefits of being able to treat issues in various body cells. The only thing that can be seen as negative from this therapy is the alteration of appearance. Several strategies for the treatment of monogenic disorders, as well as chronic diseases like cancer and AIDS, have been used in various somatic gene therapy projects. So far, 329 clinical studies with over 2,500 patients have been initiated worldwide since 1989. No significant toxicity and adverse side effects have been observed. Between 1989 and 2005, 2,335 gene therapy clinical trials have been completed, or ongoing or approved worldwide. The number of clinical trials did not increase steadily over time. It reached its highest peak in 2015. Almost 95% of the trials were in early phases of development, and 72% were ongoing. The United States undertook 67% of gene therapy clinical trials. The majority of gene therapies clinical trials identified targeted cancer diseases.
How would you resolve this dilemma? Since gene therapy is not funded by the government, it is hard for scientists to develop solutions to the problem of this therapy. I would resolve this dilemma by conducting more research. Currently, the problem with germline gene therapy is the side effect of the fetus of the newborn baby being undeveloped. If scientists could analyze more data on why the side effect is happening, then they could potentially create a solution making it more reliable. As a result of such concerns, researchers are cautious about the prospect of attempting parental gene therapy in humans. If there's an adequate treatment for something after birth, That is the way to go, Parenteau says. The scientist is essentially saying that if they had the ability to research more on the side effect, then they could make it a better process. This video also talks about how you could relate COVID-19 with gene therapy, making COVID-19 not last as long by using the gene therapy to change the DNA to make sure COVID-19 can go away faster. What consequences do you see your decision has on others? The consequences of allowing germline gene therapy is that it could cause a fetus to have side effects that are not known yet. If germline gene therapy is allowed by the government and then causes a new disease to come up in a person's body that is unknown, then the government will have to fund for hospitality and research of the new disease. Currently, the government does not allow federal funds to be used for research, but if they do fund research and something incorrect happens, then the government will be in a very bad spot. Overall, there are severe risks that follow germline gene therapy when regarding the future generations. However, these same issues can be drawn with somatic cell gene therapy. This type of gene therapy is actually encouraged for people as it does not pose any risk for the future of your family lineage. The potential issues that we see in this specific treatment is the process to be used for appearance. This video shows that there's an interviewer who is interviewing a scientist who talks about the pros and cons of germline gene therapy and gene therapy as a whole. The scientist was essentially saying that there are good effects of germline gene therapy, but also a lot of side effects, and that it's not worth risking all the side effects for just those few pro things, and could cause a lot of harm compared to all the good things you can do.
What values did we rely on to make our decision? We utilize many different values in order to come to the conclusion that germline gene therapy is unethical, while somatic cell gene therapy is ethical in certain situations. Using different sources, we gathered from scientists' data and used charts that reflected our views. We were able to come to the conclusion that was stated above. We believe that gene therapy is unethical due to the risk of harming the generations in the future. The benefits of this treatment is that there will be no concern of passing on the treated genetic disorder. In our opinions, this risk is not worth it, as there can be problems with development, specifically in fetuses. This does not seem worth taking a risk just to get rid of a genetic disorder. Furthermore, if all genetic disorders are being treated, then it will seem like people who have genetic disorders do not fit in. Additionally, talking about somatic cell gene therapy, we believe that altering the body is not healthy for people, and it could also create standards that some people are not willing to make, especially since this is only targeted towards especially wealthy people.
As mentioned before, the government is choosing not to fund any research because they believe the pros don't balance the cons. Similarly, we agree, although germline gene therapy can prevent further generations from inheriting a disease, it also has a bad side effect. If the procedure goes wrong, that could lead to an undeveloped fetus of the unborn baby. Logically speaking, it does not make sense to risk an unborn baby's life.
To add on to what we've been talking about, somatic gene therapy is the opposite and is safer and recommended. Instead of automatically risking the next generation, this changes the somatic cell of the living person, does not affect the descendants since it does not target the sperm and egg cells. This could also be unethical since it changes the physical appearance of the body. Since this is a big procedure, this is only available to those who are wealthy. The problem that arises from this is the fact that body-altering surgeries will be available to only select people. This can change standards for things such as appearance and weight, leading to mental illnesses and insecurities. Overall, we believe that germline gene therapy is unethical because we should not be interfering with the human gene pool. We also believe that somatic cell gene therapy is good when used correctly and can also be bad when something bad goes wrong.
Thank you for listening to our presentation. We hope that you now understand why we believe that germline gene therapy is unethical and how somatic cell gene therapy is unethical in wrong conditions.